Good evening, everybody. We apologize for the technical difficulties and starting a little bit later here. My name is Nicole. I am the Community Outreach Manager with Mid-Minnesota Federal Credit Union, and we're welcoming you to our Home and Auto Insurance Basics series. With me, I have Brady Hersch, who is one of our insurance agents. So I'm going to let Brady take it away here momentarily. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat function. And I will just share a little message out there as well, and we will answer them as about halfway through and then at the end as well. So, Brady, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. So, like I said, sorry about the technical difficulties there, but thanks for joining us for the auto and home insurance basics. Hopefully, can educate you a little bit on some of the basics of the insurance side of things. And like she said, my name is Brady Hersch. I am with the credit union, have been for about 5 years now. Like I said, I'm one of the agents in our insurance office. There is five of us total, so we're a pretty small office. But like I said, we like to give you the service and answer any questions. So, like I said, like Nicole said. Don't hesitate to ask any questions. That lets me know you're listening too. So, like I said, it's always good to ask questions. Okay, and so some objectives for tonight, just so you guys kind of know what to expect here. I get this question a lot. Why do we need home or auto insurance? We'll kind of dive into the whys behind that and what are the different coverages are of just overall, what can you expect? Like what do I need? What do I not need? A lot of it's uniform across home and auto, but overall it's one of those things where you just like to make sure you're getting the right information because there's so much information out there nowadays. You just never know what you're going to get. And another thing we'll cover is differences in liability and physical damage, and aka full coverage, as I'm sure you've heard that term quite a few times. And so we'll go through that and like I said, explain some of the nuances of that. We'll go through deductibles and what they are as well. Some of you probably have a pretty good idea of what they are, but still like to go through that and explain once again what to expect of that and overall what's popular with that, what's not, and yeah, set the level of expectation. And then last but not least, the insurance bundling side of things. I'd like to go through the benefits of that and realistically what you can expect from that. And like I said, it's one of those things you hear about it so many times on these commercials. Are they even telling the truth? What the heck are they talking about? So we'll go through all of that here today and keep it rolling. Okay, so first slide here, why insurance matters. I get that question quite a bit. It does protect you financially with the way how much everything costs nowadays. You just never know what bizarre thing could happen. And so you really just want to make sure that you're financially protected. Because if you didn't have it, I mean, anything that you're liable for, it could cost you your life savings and then some. And so just having that peace of mind and overall, I mean, I know it is legally required as well. Every state does have some sort of requirements on the auto side for sure. And so it's one of those things where you just want to be protected. Like I said, we'll go through some of that here as well. And then on the home side, even, I mean, it's definitely required if you have a mortgage of any kind, but really if there's any loan on any of the collateral, home, auto, boat, you name it, if there's a loan, they require full coverage insurance. And so that's just one thing, provides peace of mind for everybody, really. And so it's one of those things that you just definitely want to be weary of and not try to skim too much on coverages, because I know a lot of the banks and credit unions have certain requirements of minimum coverage as well. And so there's definitely a reason they do that. So next, for auto insurance, what it covers, like I kind of mentioned it before, but the uh, the liability side, that's the bodily injury and property damage. That would be that you are liable towards someone. That's not necessarily for you. But like I said, overall, there's a lot of different ways that that could go. Collision is, like I said, another coverage. Collision basically is, like I said, one of those things where it's only you and another vehicle involved. Pretty much everything else would fall under the comprehensive side. Uh, One thing I get quite a bit is uh, with deer and hitting them. Well, somehow that's not collision, but so that falls under comprehensive as well. So we'll kind of dive into that here in just a minute. But medical payments and personal injury protection is another coverage. Like I said, auto insurance is very uniform across the board from all companies and states. And so medical payments and the personal injury protection is definitely a requirement as well. And so it's definitely good to have that. And then last but not least, the uninsured slash underinsured motorist coverage. That's also always on any quote that you'll get, and that is very critical as well. And so, like I said, we can go through kind of what those all mean and what these abbreviations are. So, okay, so the liability side, like I said kind of before, it covers damage that you cause to others. Like I said, it's one of those things where you'll know what your liability limit is right off the bat. And so, like I said, it's one of those things that you don't want to skimp on too much because, like, if you go too low or go by the minimums, and the fact that a lot of states, the minimums are so low, a lot of agencies like ours can't even offer that. And so you just want to make sure that you're properly covered for what realistically could happen. And so, kind of piggybacking off that, the bodily injury that covers medical bills and lost wages for someone that you are at fault towards. That's not necessarily towards yourself. There is personal injury protection, and that is kind of like it sounds. It protects you and someone you might be at fault at for any sort of medical bills, lost wages, anything that you are at fault for, or even not at fault for. And so that's when there's a no fault state like Minnesota, that's definitely a key distinction there. And then next we got the property damage. Once again, it's kind of just exactly like it sounds. Vehicles and any sort of structures. I mean, obviously you don't want to run into someone's garage or something, but you just never know what happens. I mean, I've seen people drive through storefronts. You just really never know what people are up to. And so that is where that would be covered. And so, like I said, one of those things you just got to be careful. And like it says on the bottom there, required by law, and it's in every state. They all have at least some sort of minimum. You definitely don't want to drive around with too little coverage, but overall, it's better to be safe than sorry with a lot of this because it's just crazy world out there nowadays. So next we got the physical damage coverage, and that's a majority of claims and reasons why you'd probably use your insurance. Collision, kind of like I said before, is damage with another vehicle is pretty much the only thing that applies there. And then next would be the comprehensive, which is pretty much everything else. Most popular, I would say, is probably replacing a windshield, things like that, hitting a deer. I know it says theft and weather as well, which are very popular. I know the deductibles as well. I would say most common for collision and comprehensive would be 500 and 1,000. I'd say those are probably about 90% of the policies that we run across. And so one nice thing, especially with comprehensive, if it's a glass claim, like I mentioned with the windshields, there is usually a $0 deductible for that for most people policies. That's how they do it. And so that's kind of nice because those windshields get to be a little spendy pretty quickly. So and then kind of like I said before too, if any loan on the vehicle, but any type of vehicle, they require collision and comprehensive pretty much all the time, unless you get a special exception where you're not driving the vehicle. So we call it the storage only insurance or storage insurance. That's basically just means comprehensive only, no liability, no collision, just parked. And then if something happens to the vehicle sitting there, then it's covered. But like I said, when you weren't driving it. And so lenders require that to protect you and themselves because it's at a total loss. You don't want to pay for a car that's been totaled and now you can't drive it either. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody at the end of the day. So. All right. So now we're at the home insurance side, but I kind of want to stop here and just see, is there any questions or comments of any kind about the auto side?
Brady, we did get a good question that came in, and it's
Awesome.
how does it work since we are technically a no-fault state with auto insurance?
That's a great question. And so no fault state, basically it goes on your record where there's no fault of either kind, and then personal injury protection kicks in where and like I said, it covers everybody involved. And so a lot of times when it's no fault, especially when they deem it that way, for the personal injury side, your policy will cover you and their policy will cover them and kind of not really go your separate ways, but kind of nobody's liable. Nobody's really taking too big of a hit here, but especially if everyone has insurance and has the proper coverages, you kind of just cover it on your own, so to speak, would be the easiest way to put that.
So you would just go through your own individual insurance, they would go through their own individual insurance, and if there's deductibles and so forth, everybody handles their own, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yep, yep, you
Okay.
got it. And sometimes, and that's where it gets kind of tricky because they say no fault state, but then sometimes if it's clearly your fault, it's still your fault. So it's kind of it gets in the weeds a little bit, but a lot of times when they say it's no fault, that just means that okay, my insurance is paying my stuff, your insurance is paying your stuff, and a lot of that has to do with the reporting on the insurance side of things. So like if you, because they all pull reports, and if it says no fault, that's definitely better than an at fault accident, if that makes sense. That's kind of probably clear as mud. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on that, but that's yeah, they say no fault, but it sort of is, sort of not. I would say is kind of a good way to put that.
So work closely with your agent.
Yes, yes, I would say that's probably a better way to do it because I don't. There's times I feel like I don't know if I understand it for some of the ways they explain things. So, no, that's a great question. Love that.
All right. That's the only question we had come in so far.
Okay, awesome. But then yeah, so the home insurance side, what it covers, seems kind of obvious, but the dwelling is the main focus, I would say, because the house, if you don't have that, you're not really insuring much else. And so dwelling is the top coverage. They call it coverage A. Going down the line, other structures. Other structures is anything that would be detached. So that would be, detached garage, a garden shed, pole barn, just really anything that's not the house itself and attached to the house. And so there's a lot of different policies that probably should have more coverage for other structures. I see that quite a bit around the areas that we serve, especially with the credit union, because a lot of people have a lot of barns and nice buildings that other structures is usually 10% of the coverage of dwelling A, and so that's usually not even close to enough. But then going down the line here, personal property, like I said, that's really anything that's your personal property. That's furniture, clothing, you name it. I would say a lot of people are probably overinsured on this end, but because personal property doesn't include vehicles or anything of that nature, it's jewelry, stuff, guns, stuff like that would be included. So like I said, it's a lot of people are overinsured, I would say, for this, just with what the value is, because a lot of times you get plate replacement costs, but hundreds of thousands of dollars for personal property isn't usually realistic for most people, not all people, but most, I would say. So, and then going down here, liability, once again, just like the auto side, you'll definitely want to make sure that you have enough liability coverage. I mean, someone slipping on the ice, for example, just walking by on your property, that could, I mean, you could be liable for that. It's not like you pushed them down or something, but unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in. And so that is a good example of why you would want liability coverage is really as much as you can get. And so it's very similar to auto insurance as well, where 300,000 or 500,000 worth of liability coverage is pretty standard for most policies. Really don't ever see lower than that by any means. So. And then last but not least, there on the bottom, loss of use. I would say that's just more for if you're displaced, and it's usually disaster type of thing, where it covers your traveling expenses, hotel, things of that nature, where you're just basically can't be in your home. And so that's always it's good coverage you don't really realize you have until you need it. And so that's definitely, I would say, critical, to say the least. So. And kind of like I said before, the dwelling and personal property coverage covers the structure of the home, anything attached, like I said. And so, fire, wind, and hail are the top three. I would say wind and hail. That's the most popular one by far because that really is how a lot of roofs get replaced. And so that's where you're going to want to make sure you know your deductible for that. That's where a lot of people try to save money by going really high with the wind hail deductible. But then when it's time to pay for it, you know, a lot of companies have a minimum of 5,000, and so it's one of those things you want to do what's best for you and make it realistic. Like, okay, can I afford this if this happened? Because as we know, storms kind of just come out of nowhere and they don't do it on your timetable, unfortunately. So, but yeah, like I said, so protection against fire as well. Like I said, you get replacement costs. So if it's a total loss, they go off replacement cost. One thing we see quite a bit is that in smaller towns, the price you pay for the house is a lot lower than what the replacement cost would be just because of how the market works. And so some people feel like they're overinsured or why do I need this much insurance? And so if you had to build it all brand new is where they get it from. So regardless of where it's built, that's how they do that. And so I know sometimes people ask me how they get this random, really specific number, and that's where they definitely got it from. And so that's, yeah, in a nutshell, how they determine and that's the coverage A dwelling that you'll see you pull up your home insurance policy. That'll be the first thing you see under the coverages. It'll be the highest amount there, say dwelling. So, and then, yeah, and then personal belongings inside the home. There's different, I mean, you can schedule personal properties so you make sure it's for sure covered and you don't have to have a bunch of proof. I know people do this with jewelry a lot, guns, art, things like that. There's all sorts of different optional coverages you can also add. There's water backup and sump pump overflow, cyber protection, equipment breakdown, which is like appliance coverage essentially, service line coverage, which is buried utility lines. So if something happens there, you're not liable. So a lot of pretty much anything you can think of for add-ons is available. Uh, some providers they let you add like a boat or a trailer or skid steer. It's really that can get really company specific. But like I said, it's nice to have those options for sure. So. And then next, yeah, the home liability and loss of use, kind of like we touched on before. It's just pretty much always injuries to others on some level is what the liability would usually mean for the home insurance side. I know some people with lake properties, that's why they get umbrella policies as well. Because what happens with umbrellas is whatever's involved, the home or auto policy or boat or whatever, that policy, like those limits kick in first, and then if it goes past it, then the umbrella kicks in. And so if you have some kid screwing around on your dock and you don't realize it, and now there's a big ordeal, that's where the home liability kicks in, and hopefully it's a high enough number for you. Otherwise, the umbrella, that's one of the times I would recommend it. So, and yeah, like I said, kind of just other legal defense coverage. That's another one I didn't mention for add-ons. There's all sorts of different add-on coverages. Loss of use, that's a pretty standard one. That's definitely not an add-on. That's pretty much across the board, always included for anywhere in any state. Temporary housing, hotel, living expenses, especially if your house burns down. That's really when that comes in handy. I've seen it firsthand. It can be tough if you don't have that, or it can make it a lot easier if you do have it. So, definitely one of those coverages you want to make sure is sufficient, to say the least. And then next we got the deductibles, and that's very similar to the auto side. It's basically the amount you pay before insurance does. And so if your deductible is $1,000 and the claim is going to be 10,000 total, they'll pay out nine, you'll pay 1,000, and away you go, and on your merry way. Higher deductibles definitely get you lower premiums. Kind of like I've said a few times, you want to make sure it's something you can afford, though. I have some people that go really, really high, and then something happens that they just didn't plan for, and then they're in a bind just because it's a $7,500 deductible or something just kind of ridiculous. And unfortunately, they're really jacking up the minimum deductibles that they require, especially for the wind hail side. Is I know, like I don't remember if I mentioned this, but Minnesota is number three for wind hail claims out of all states. And for our population, that seems surprising to me, but had a lot of wind and hail and it's super windy up here all the time. So I guess that makes sense. But like I said, in deductibles, that applies per claim. So overall, it's not each individual thing. It wouldn't be your roof and then your window and then, your garage door or something. It would just be one one claim, especially if it's from one storm. And so overall, that's essentially how the deductibles work. Like I said, I would always like them to be lower, but I know it's trying to save money nowadays is definitely something that we're all trying to do, quite frankly. So, and then bundling different policies. Basically, that just means that you have multiple policies with one carrier. Like I said, it makes things a lot smoother. I mean, you still usually have multiple bills with one company, but it can definitely save you 10 to 25% off what you were going to pay without it. The more policies you have, the better. I know a lot of people have, most of the time you have all of them with one company. Sometimes that's not the best case. That's where if you have a trusted agent, you really want to make sure that they because like I said, we have 12 companies, for example, and so really like to play with the numbers and see what is actually the best. Because like I said, a lot of the companies are very good to work with, and so you just want to make sure that you're getting the best coverage for the best bang for your buck. And because like I said, it's very uniform, and that's why they do it across the insurance industry is to make sure it's easy to compare between companies and easy for consumers to know what they're looking at. And so making sure that it's apples to apples, as they say. So, but yeah, bundling can definitely be a good thing. It's not always the best case. It's not one size fits all. A lot of times it is, but sometimes certain carriers are good for one thing, but not the other. And so it's just a lot of jockeying the numbers and just doing what's best. So. And then, yeah, overall, I'd say final tips, and this really goes for auto and home and really anything, quite frankly. Review your coverages annually. I would say anytime there's a renewal, just make sure everything looks correct still. I know people sometimes breeze over things, but life gets busy and then you don't think of things. And so just really making sure, I mean, you don't necessarily have to shop around every year. It wouldn't hurt either, especially if you're very organized. Getting your stuff to an agent usually is pretty smooth, I would say, for most people. So, just making sure that, yeah, like it says too, major life events. Obviously, if you have a kid, you're probably not going to think about insurance right this second, but just really being mindful of making sure you're properly covered. Um, and yeah, like it even says there too, don't insure on price alone. I mean, I'd make sure you're getting the best service. Make sure is there can be little add-ons you do or don't have that can change the price, and so making sure you're comparing everything the same. Like it says, having a trusted agent. I would say is a big one. I know personally I'm known for being very brutally honest, and so I like standing by that and just making sure that you're not overinsured, but making sure you definitely have enough. And so just making sure you know what you're signing up for. And there's a lot of options out there, and so it's tough with misinformation and things of that nature. But just really making sure you know what you're getting into because at the end of the day, agents represent you, and there's always another company out there. So if it's something that makes you uncomfortable there's really no obligation to do anything. And so, like I said, a lot of good companies out there too. So, and then so yeah, other than that, like I said, this is our team. Like I said before, we're a small five-man office. So, like I said, I'm one of the agents, and we got me, and then Alex, who's based out of Brainerd as well. Craig is our insurance manager. We do all types of insurance, and so that's why it says Tom does Medicare. He handles that Medicare, health insurance, that whole side of things. And then our customer service gal, who's also great, Caitlin. Like I said, we can all do everything. It's just kind of have our specific roles, but like I said, if you ever call us, you always get a live person, and we can do anything for you. So, like I said, we're based out of Brainerd. That's where the headquarters are. I'm one of the guys that travels the most, but everywhere and nowhere, as I tell people. So,
Brady, we did have a question that came in
awesome.
surrounding tools. So if somebody has expensive tools and toolboxes at their house, or if they have personal tools that they bring to work, how does that get covered?
Yeah, a lot of times that would be scheduled personal property. More often than not, depending on the carrier, that'll be under the scheduled personal property, and then they make it get kind of specific with like what it is, like value, description, and a lot of times if there's a certain amount, it's a deductible involved for that. It's usually very low, but that's typically how that would be covered.
Okay. A couple of other questions that actually I got before the session for folks that were not able to attend the live session.
Sure.
But one of them was in regards to trampolines. So are trampolines an issue? And if I have one, what should I be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, when I started in this business, I couldn't believe how much of a problem trampolines are, honestly. They do not like trampolines. There's a lot of times that if they see you have one, they will not. If I put that on like say I'm quoting and I put that on the quote, they won't even offer me a quote. Like or they'll jack it up to the point where the price difference you could buy a new trampoline. I would say if you're able to fence it in at as much as possible, that usually helps. But a lot of the carriers they get really squirrely about the trampolines. I don't really have a better way to put that. I only out of our 12, I only know about two that will even offer a quote with trampoline. Um, one thing I've told people is like, I mean, if they see you have one, you can always remove it and then put it back when they leave. I mean, because I don't know, they just don't really they only come by once every few years. So I mean, there's always that, but that's always a risk I don't know if I would be willing to take. But overall, yeah, they don't like trampolines. There's no it's because of the liability side is why. I mean, I get it. I see their end of things, but it's gotten a little, I would say it's gotten a little ridiculous, quite frankly. But yeah, they hate them. They really do. I don't have a great way to put that, but um, if you can
So
fence
two
it in a
questions.
little bit. Oh yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean
yep,
to interrupt you.
yep,
Two more
nope.
questions that came in. I'm going to jump to one first and then I'll go to the other. But how about like hot tubs, or I'm going to even add on to that pools?
Yeah. So hot tubs are fine. Pools, they like pools to be fenced in. Um, they're definitely better than trampolines. They don't love pools either, quite honestly. So if you're trying to have fun, they do not like fun apparently. No, like as long as you disclose it, they really like it to be fenced in. I don't know what I've never gotten a clear answer on what that matters at all. Because you could just jump over a fence. But if it's fenced, if the pool is fenced in, that is better. But if you have a pool, they're going to charge you a lot more. Unfortunately, that's the way that it's every company seems to do it that way, at least the ones we have. And I've heard this from other agents as well in different agencies that yeah, it's pretty uniform across the board with the pools. So like I said, yeah, unfortunately, if it's fun, they probably don't want you to do it.
Okay. And then another question that came in was, does Mid-Minnesota have their own insurance agents in each town? And let's see your town that there is a branch. So do we have an agent that represents each one of our branches?
We do. Yep. Yep, we sure do. So me and it kind of like shows on the slide, me and Alex are the only two that travel. And so I cover yeah, we have someone designated at every branch, and so him and I are very flexible where we can meet with anybody. Tom kind of travels a little bit too with his Medicare stuff, but Craig and Caitlin are always in the Brainerd headquarters branch in the basement there, and then Alex and I cover every other branch, and so him and I have schedules that we have set to try to make it pretty consistent. But if someone calls us and gives us a heads up, we can pretty much be anywhere at any time within a day or two. So, but yeah, the branches I cover. Ada, Detroit Lakes, Alexandria, Fergus Falls, and Wadena, and then there's times I'll go to Brainerd Baxter, but and then the rest of our branches are covered by Alex to make that easy. So
So if somebody wanted to meet with you or Alex or anybody on the team, what's the best way to do that? Should they contact you directly? Should they go to our website, mmfcu.org? Should they call the 218 number? What's your suggestion on that?
yeah, yeah, I would say calling us directly is probably going to be the best overall because I see I just noticed this our phone number is actually 218-828, just so in case anyone's wondering. Just a heads up, I was looking at that. There's too many eights and ones and twos. But yeah, calling us directly. If you call me or Alex, you'll get a hold of one of us. We're always available. If we can't answer, we call you back. Definitely same day, usually within an hour or two. And so overall, I would say just call us directly and then leave a voicemail because like I said we're very flexible. The schedule is usually very flexible, and so because like I said client comes first at the end of the day, so just keep it real simple. I mean, email is fine too because I know it's got our emails listed, but email or phone, either one works.
Wonderful.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch that before with the you had me review it and obviously I didn't see it either, so
That's okay. That's okay. Let's see here. A couple other questions that I got in regards to personal property when it comes under the homeowner's policy. Um, how does somebody like, let's just say a house unfortunately burns down, the contents are there. It's actually maybe it right is at what their replacement co or what was the personal property costs are. How does somebody though prove if they have expensive jewelry or um, expensive tools or things of that nature? Do you have to, is it good to take a video? I heard that before, or pictures of what the contents are. If you've added an expensive wet bar or something in your basement, you refinished your basement and excuse me, after you had already started your policies. Like, what are some good tips on that?
yeah, I think yeah, great question. I think those are all good tips. I mean, because really they do. I mean, they will probably fight you tooth and nail if you don't have any sort of proof. And so, yes, pictures, videos. That's why some people will schedule certain things that they know for sure that they would want to be covered. If it's scheduled, it's a lot easier for them to be like, okay, well, obviously you did it ahead of time. But yeah, I would say pictures, videos, any sort of receipts or any sort of if it's something expensive you bought online, just being able to prove it that way. Because I know if like especially yeah, like you said, if it's a fire and it burns everything down, it's pretty miserable experience. I mean, because trying to prove that you what you had and didn't have is kind of a nightmare. I have been a part of it. It's not great, and so just anything you can do, nothing is too little. I would say if it feels all this is overboard, no, it really never. That's never true. I would say, and so yeah, really any of those, any of the above, I would say.
Okay. And then the last question that I got was instead of having individual policies, so a policy on my home and my car or my ATV or whatever it happens to be, is there a way to just have one blanket umbrella policy that covers everything that I have? And then just increasing the policy or the amount on that umbrella policy?
Well, no, not really.
Okay.
There might be some random in company that maybe offers that. I've never heard of one that does, but nothing would surprise me in today's world. Because of what a lot of times an umbrella is add-on coverage, and you can't get an umbrella unless you have all those individual policies. Because those limits all kick in first. So the umbrella doesn't do anything even until you're surpassed on, whatever it is, auto accident, okay, umbrella. And so unfortunately, there's not like an easy easy way to do that. You would think there would be in 2026. And some companies get pretty clever with being able to add quite a bit onto the umbrella without having to have, a little ATV policy for the 98 Polaris, or whatever. But and that's company specific too. But a lot of times it's still got to have their own policies for each individual.
Okay. Thank you. With that said, I don't see any other questions that have come in, so we could give them an extra few minutes on their evening if we wanted to.
Sure.
All
Sounds
right.
great.
Well, thank you everybody for joining. We appreciate, thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties. We do appreciate that as well. Any questions, feel free to, reach out to us. Go to our website, mmfcu.org. We have little drop downs where you can find our insurance department and of course all of our departments. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. We thank you and everybody have a fantastic evening.
Thanks, guys.